Welcome to the Sensible Center podcast, where two middle-aged guys drunkenly talk politics and political reform. Grab an adult beverage and enjoy the show. Further information can be found at sensiblecenterpack.com. You can reach us at sensiblecenterpack@gmail.com or follow us on X at USASCPack. Hey, everybody. Long time no see.
We've 100 days in.
Introduce yourselves, because, maybe our podcast listeners forgot who is on the cast. I am Kevin. Who else is on the...
I'm Bob. Welcome to Sensible Center. 100 days later.
And Tony, also known as Dr. B.
The one guy who can stand us.
I'll take whatever I can get.
We've actually been asked by people who are listeners, we thank you again for listening, about, why we haven't been on for the last month and a half. And frankly, there hasn't been that much to talk about. So I thought, wait till there's enough to talk about to fill an hour or so. So actually, my intent was to wait for the dust to settle. Again, a stupid idea.
That's definitely more accurate.
And the dust hasn't really settled, but we're going to do this anyway.
With Trump.
So basically, we picked 100 days, which is a good time to kind of look at where the country's at, where the administration's at. So we're going to kind of go through a hodgepodge of things that have happened since the last time we spoke, which I believe was last year. And to do so, we're going to actually spin a wheel of fortune and pick a topic and talk about it, but talk about it for a limited period of time. Well, how's 10 minutes sound, you guys? We don't have to talk about something for 10 minutes, but if we start talking too long, the alarm will go off. How does that sound to everybody?
Works here.
Sounds good.
All right, great. So, you guys ready to start?
Spin
Anything
away.
to add? Spin the wheel, they say. So here we go. Ooh. I'd like to buy a vowel. Let's talk tariffs, since that's kind of the topic of the day, right? That's something fresh in our memory, and then we'll kind of go back in time. So
tariffs,
the most beautiful word in the English language, right?
Tariffs. I thought you said Paris. This is new to me too. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't realize the Paris Accord was on the agenda, but okay.
Who wants to start with tariffs? I won't dominate the conversation. I'll just sit back.
Well, my question is, why tariffs? Why did he go down the road of tariffs? There's so many other economic controls that can be put in place. We have trade deals with countries all around the world. Why would you break those particular accords and invoke tariffs as a means to try and reorder trade around the globe? Because all it does is create trade wars, and then creates inflation, and then sees cost increase for everybody in every nation around the globe.
Yeah, my economics background, at least the studies that I did, and I did a lot of studying finance and economics, and I hate tariffs. I've never liked them. I don't think they're good, right? For obvious reasons, they do raise prices on things. It results in an uneven distribution of production and an uneven distribution of labor and all those issues. That said, President Trump also ran on tariffs. He made it pretty clear in his campaign what he was going to do. He got support of a lot of unions based upon those. So these tariffs should not be a surprise to anybody. And it's hard to fault him for following through with the campaign promise.
Well, he
also
promised that he'd bring consumer goods down immediately, and the invocation of tariffs that he's there we go. He's a tariffist, and we don't negotiate with tarifists. The problem is...
I'd say he's terrific.
There you go.
Terrific.
The problem is that he campaigned, I'm going to bring prices down day one. So what's his primary strategy? Put in tariffs, which are a tax to importers not the country who's shipping goods to us. It's a tax on the importers who are then going to transfer that tax as a cost onto the consumer, which means prices are going to rise, which means they're a mechanism that are inflationary. So he campaigned that he was going to kill off inflation. He was going to reduce costs for families all across America. And what does he do? He puts in place the most inflationary mechanism he could possibly use.
But can I play the devil's advocate here? I mean, to Bob's point, he did promise tariffs, right? But I guess you could give him credit for carrying through on an idiotic promise. But also, we used to, back in when America was great, right? We used to raise our revenue via tariffs. I mean, there's a long history in this country prior to the income tax being instated in the early 20th century that most of our revenue came through duties and tariffs, right? It's kind of why we fought a war back in 65 or 75. But it was a way we as a country raised revenue for a long period of time. Now we have other taxes that we've done, but in cutting taxes and raising tariffs, couldn't that work out? And do you both agree? So it sounds like we have agreement that the consumer or importers share in the cost. The foreign country is not paying the tariff costs. So we have an agreement in that. We have agreement in generally tariffs are not a very efficient way of managing global trade. The biggest thing I had with it, actually, is when he brought that chart out, immediately I said, those aren't the tariff levels. And if you're going to do this, why would you then just make up a number that made no sense?
Do you know where he got the number from?
Reciprocal tariffs.
Do you know how they got the formula for that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do.
They asked Chat GPT. It gave them a formula.
Formula that makes no sense because we might actually want to import everything from a particular country, in which case they'd have 100% tariff, right?
Exactly. That's kind of the problem here is that Trump looks at things through the trade, what he views as the trade imbalance. He looks at the bottom line, the dollars exchanged, and says, well, this country, we are spending more for goods that we get from them rather than they're spending on goods they get from us. And that's a terrible way to look at things because you can look at the relationship that we have with Canada as a really good example. We have a trade deficit as far as goods goes with Canada, but the goods that we buy from Canada, they're energy based. They're electricity, they're oil. Much of the gasoline that we produce in this country comes from Alberta crude. And if we somehow manage to piss off Canada enough that they turn off the taps, we're not going to have gasoline because all of our refinery capacity is configured for that type of crude oil. We would actually have to go and do a retrofit, completely change everything so that we could then use domestic crude, which is a completely different beast. So we have to take all these things into consideration, and we don't. And that's the part.
The numbers, costs are falling. CPI is contracting compared. It's lower than it was when. What I'm getting at is the cost of these tariffs have not shown up yet. Will it? I'm sure if these tariffs continue, we will start to see costs related to that. Whether or not it's balanced out by potentially lower interest rates, lower energy costs, lower shelter costs, etc., we'll find out.
But do you do this now in the administration, Bob? I mean,
when else is he going to do it?
Well, we were actually going pretty strong as a country, right? I mean, GDP was good. We were probably one of the strongest countries and economies coming out of COVID.
He knows there's going to be pain with this, right? But he also knows he needs.
Well, what's the end game? What's the end game? Please tell me the end game.
I think he wants to have things humming along better than ever by the
what does that mean?
Midterms.
What is that?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Or is it just to level the playing field? Or is it to raise money in the tariffs? They've said all three.
And let's speak.
I think he probably wants a bit of all of that. I do think deficit spending is it's a bad metric or measure to aim for obvious reasons. That said, I think what he should be doing is drawing the hard line to say reciprocal tariffs. Canada puts heavy tariffs on our dairy and ag.
That's
There's
wrong.
heavy regulation on our banks.
That's all wrong.
That stuff.
That's all wrong.
No, it's not.
It's all wrong.
Just match the tariffs.
Nope.
That's all he needs to do, country by country.
Nope.
China's a little different story because they're stealing from us.
Wow, that's a lot of great talking points from Fox, but there's nothing to support it. Absolutely nothing to support it. Go look at the USA Mexico Canada Free Trade Agreement. There are tariffs identified in that document, but there are thresholds involved that you have to get to before the tariff comes into play. There are virtually no tariffs in play, even on the dairy products.
No, there are absolutely tariffs on the dairy prod.
I'm
trying to find some numbers here in the background.
There aren't.
That's our alarm.
That's our alarm?
Time's up on tariffs. Do we want to add another 2 minutes to tariffs overtime?
Let's revisit it.
All right, we'll come back to it if we feel like it. So that ends the discussion on tariffs for now. We can come back to it if we want.
Spin the wheel.
Spin the wheel again. All right, Tony, I'm going to let you pick a topic this time. Ooh, what is it on?
Let's see. Let's go with executive orders. That's been a hot button topic in the media for pretty well the whole 100 days. So let's hit that.
I like the big signatures. I do like that. I like the ceremony of it, right? You know, he has a press conference and he's got the little desk next to it and he's got the pens. Although I thought you had to sign with the pens before you passed them out. He basically signs with one pen and then passes the rest of them out, which I don't understand what the point of that is. That's just my point. That's my take on executive orders, and I'm sticking with it. Bob, any other comments on executive orders?
All the presidents use them too much.
So you don't like
a way to try to bypass Congress. I've never really liked executive orders, but I also look at it like this: what has Congress done in the last 100 days? And then you could take it and say, what has Congress done in the last 2 years?
Well,
there's nothing. They've done
nothing.
Nothing.
A symptom of a broken system, right? You're absolutely right. Congress is unable to resolve major problems. So they've sort of abdicated their responsibility to the executive. And I think, to be honest, we've seen it, I think, starting with Obama mostly, and increasing over time the use of executive orders. Now, as with everything, Trump has taken it to an extreme level.
Yeah. I mean, look at the border. The amount of people coming over the border is pretty much nil right now. Oh, we have that on the list. Okay. But that was done via executive order, more or less, right?
Right.
Although
that's everything.
Just say follow the law as it exists.
Well, the same controls have been in place for a number of years.
Right.
In Trump's first term, he put the rules in play, and that was something that the Biden administration really didn't change. They continued to apply the pressure on the border. They deported an incredible number of people. So they basically continued the Trump doctrine.
They were bringing people in the plane load, and there were hundreds of thousands of people coming over regularly under Biden. The numbers now are, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the numbers now are very, very little, hundreds a month, as opposed to tens of thousands a month.
None of that.
It's
Again, where are you getting your numbers?
All right,
like I live in a border state, and we're supposedly one of the ones that's getting hammered by this illegal immigration. It's just the opposite. We can't do stuff because we don't have any immigrants, and it's been that way for a number of years. You can't get a roof put on a house because
according to Axios, under Biden, at the high point, it was 250,000 illegals coming through a month.
What was it before Trump took office, or the summer before? my impression is that it dropped off precipitously once Biden woke up, or somebody woke him up, like spring of last year, and said you're running for president, sir. We might want to do something at the border. And I don't know if Tony agrees with me, but I think that's what cost them the election ultimately. That they their policy at the border was just stupid,
Well,
and
the
they
extent
should have addressed it earlier. Whether we have a comprehensive immigration policy or not, you can't just let people stream over the border. And Fox News set up a camera at the border, and you just see people crossing the border. People don't like that. I don't like that. I think 90% of Americans don't like that. We want controlled immigration. I'm for immigration, legal immigration, but an uncontrolled open border is no good. But I do think they came around to correct that. And I think if you want to give Trump credit for putting fear in people to come to this country, absolutely. I give him an A. I give him an A. I'm thinking about carrying around my birth certificate now.
Judging from some of the contractors that I need to come to my house and fix stuff and how difficult it is to get them lately too, I think it's definitely affecting some of the service industry.
Yeah.
Is that good or bad?
Again, I think in this country we should be paying people whatever the market demands, and the market isn't going to demand a fair wage if we're importing cheap illegal labor.
And you're talking about inflation again there, Bob.
But that's also one of the foundations of our capitalist society. Yeah, it's one of the foundations of our capitalist society. We're going to try and get the cheapest labor that we can. And if that means bringing people across the border illegally, like seriously, if the administration wanted to fix that problem, the first place they want to go is to the farms, to the slaughterhouses, to all these agro companies that are leveraging illegal immigration to keep the costs of their products down.
I've said this multiple times to Kevin. I actually think I said this to the Doge team. If we really want to stop this problem and do it effectively and cheaply, you fine every company caught hiring an illegal $100,000 a head a day. That solves the problem real quick.
Preach on, brother. Preach on.
I think we all agree on that. Yep. But I think we all know the reason why that doesn't exist, right?
Let's go back to executive orders.
They're trying to talk two ways, right? I don't think they've deported many people. I looked it up, and I think the White House is saying they've deported 140,000, which I think, by White House math is that you could just apply a factor of probably 10 or 15% of that to get a true number.
You've got all kinds of judges. A judge had an order today that basically said that our Border Patrol cannot arrest any illegal without a warrant. Starting now. Absolutely ridiculous.
So do we throw due process, Bob? I mean, that's the question. I mean, it's a legitimate question.
Illegal should not have due process in the country for breaking the law.
If I was picked up on the street and I didn't have anything with me and I'm put on a plane to El Salvador, what do you think happens? Oh, maybe that's already happened.
You had a sombrero and a mustache.
Right.
Or we can go back to Johnny Dangerously, the movie Johnny Dangerously, and we're just going to scoop you off the street if you don't have your birth certificate with you or your certificate of naturalization. We're going to deport you to Sweden.
Once you go down that path of not having due process,
we had Joe Biden literally flying these hundreds of thousands of illegals into the country on planes. They need to go.
And how do we determine who goes? And do you stop any type of due process?
And are we going to continue to focus in only on the brown people? Because there's lots of Europeans, there's lots of people from the Middle East that come in illegally.
Yeah, I think you don't need to send them through the court system. I think you give an opportunity to prove via an ID or social security number or a green card, whatever it happens to be, that they belong here. And if they can't, out you go.
Am I wrong to assume or did I hear wrong that Trump was toying with ideas of sending U.S. citizens to offshore prisons?
Yes, he did.
I'm pretty sure he's toyed with that idea. And hey, I think, I don't like gang criminals here. Absolutely. The idea of getting them out is I'll support. But once you go down the road of just being able to pick people up on the street and send them, I don't know what you got. And you have a trust me type of thing. And I think as a libertarian, Bob, you should be very concerned about that.
I think it could be pretty easily proven by comparing name and address to IRS records.
We changed topics, so I'll let this one roll a little bit longer, even though our time limit was up.
There are plenty of reliable methods the government can use to determine whether or not these people are here legally.
Law enforcement doesn't have access to IRS records. They have to get a warrant for that.
The IRS has started sharing those with law enforcement.
When did that happen?
They do. About a month and a half ago.
How were they allowed to do that?
They asked, and the IRS leadership said, "Sure, you can have them."
But Bob, don't you think we should not be doing this on the fly? Just like, other topics we'll talk about. Maybe the direction is something that most of Americans support, but the implementation and how they're going about it is a whole nother matter. We shouldn't be doing it on the fly. There should be an agreed upon method with Congress or some other bodies. I mean, the judiciary is trying to weigh in on this stuff, and they're being ignored in some cases.
So wait a second. I want to go back to that.
Sure.
So the IRS has taken it upon themselves to say it's okay. We're going to share taxpayer private data, the most sensitive data on our citizens that we have, with law enforcement. But we cannot get a gun registry in this country because we're not allowed to share information between federal systems. But the IRS decides that they can do that. There's something seriously, seriously wrong about that, and something seriously illegal about that.
Yeah, I mean, the rules.
An article from the USA Today, but yes, that's the case. They're sharing it now.
This probably has something to do with
individual taxpayer identification numbers,
national security issues, Tony, some type of emergency.
Well, there's an interesting twist. Is that when Trump first came into office, he declared an emergency
right away.
Yeah, an energy emergency, even though that we're producing more energy now than we have at any other time in the history of this nation. He declared an emergency based on energy. And they have leveraged that to basically run over any constitutional challenge that's come up. So again, I sit there and scratch my head, and it's like the party of the defender of the Constitution are just absolutely running roughshod over it right now. And I scratch my head, and I'm like, how does that happen?
Expansion of the federal government. But what I'm seeing here is beyond anything I've seen with any other president in my lifetime. Definitely. And
I think that well, there's all kinds of layers here. Judges are putting stops to things that they shouldn't either on a biased rather than constitutional basis.
How so?
The executive branch.
How so?
And then
on what basis do you determine that?
You can go look at the judge and look at their background. Are they liberal? Are they conservative? Who appointed them? And then what decision did they make?
Trump appointed judges are stopping stuff as well. Yeah, I don't buy this become politicized either, because we have got Trump,
the executive branch and the judicial branch, and not just at the Supreme level, has become politicized.
How can you say that when Trump appointed judges are also pushing back against some of the stuff that is happening, and they're saying, whoa, you can't do that. It's not constitutional. It's not legal. And they're not even pointing to constitutionality of it. They're pointing to it's against the law.
I'm not saying it's a 100% across the board problem. I'm saying that it's a problem. You know, again, I'm not saying every judge in this country is corrupt. I'm saying many of them are. We had two judges recently arrested.
You're way overstating the case.
Yeah, we just had two judges arrested. One was housing a gang member, and not only that, but helping them to get guns. And then the other one had an
Housing a
they
game.
helped in their.
Are you talking about the
literally.
Milwaukee dude?
Yeah, well, the Milwaukee judge is the second one. Yes.
Well,
So
The
I mean, we
Milwaukee
can get
judge
into that.
walked the accused out a different
Out
door,
the-
and she
Yeah.
got hammered for aiding and abetting. You want to talk
Well,
about
what do you call it?
an executive overreach?
what
I
would,
don't think these agents should be prowling our
Court
rooms.
systems.
where else are they going to grab this guy?
Wait outside the
where he is.
courtroom. You wait outside the courtroom. Law enforcement is supposed to follow specific rules and decorum within the court. They just can't barge into a courtroom and haul somebody out.
I don't see why not. They do it where people work. They don't just do this with illegals.
The court is different. You are getting your chance to speak against charges against you in a room of your peers.
You don't see how that would take away people's right
Wow.
to a hearing, right, Bob? If
It was an unrelated.
they feel threatened to go to court on a matter, whatever it is, could be domestic abuse, could be anything.
Yeah.
Just imagine the range of things that people would show up in court for. And you're saying they don't deserve their day in court. I
No,
mean,
I'm saying the judge broke the
all
law.
rules
That's
are
all I'm
off.
saying. The judge broke the law.
all
judge
rules
broke
are
the
off
law.
in these cases.
The judge didn't break the law. The judge took the person out a different door.
To avoid law enforcement.
We'll see what the courts ultimately rule in these cases, which I'm sure they're going to be challenged because all this stuff is being challenged.
Yeah, this is
What surprises me is that you're okay with it.
This is clear intimidation of the courts. This is clear intimidation of the judicial by the legislative or by the executive.
Kevin said it'll get challenged in court. I don't see anything wrong with it.
And you'll say it's a biased
Wow.
decision on whatever somebody rules if it's not the right way. So, I mean, we're going down a dark path once we go down this route because there's nothing that can't be done at that point, right, Bob? This is how it happens, by the way. This is how authoritarian governments happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen here. I'm not jumping off the ship, but the steps occur this way. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens little by little by little.
It's been happening
And
long
the
before
frog,
Trump.
the frog
Trump did not start
realizes
it.
that it's been boiling in the water and it's too late, right?
He's trying to stop it. Trump didn't start it.
What is it? What?
Huh? Well, no, I actually,
Again.
you know something. I will agree with Bob here. This all started with, the Patriot Act. That's when all this actually started.
That's
Oh,
a
sure.
large portion of it. Yeah.
We,
The Patriot Act
And
was
it's still-
horrible, and
and it's
Patriot
still-
Act 2 was even worse.
Congress still continues to approve it. Whenever it comes up, I don't know if it's every year or if it's every 4 years or whatever it is. Congress continues to pass it.
I didn't say Trump
Or
started it.
extend it.
I'm saying that the path to authoritarian governments happen in stages and people get used to certain things and then it goes farther and farther. And if you don't think they're testing the waters on this stuff, you haven't listened to Steve Bannon in a while because this is the whole strategy.
No, I absolutely understand. He's kind of the polar opposite to what Saul Alinsky is on the other side of the aisle.
I don't think Saul Alinsky's ever had the ear of the president of the United States. You could say he did, but I don't think he ever did.
Yeah,
Obama quoted Alinsky many times,
Quoted
at least
him.
in his youth, not
He
necessarily
didn't hire him.
in his youth.
He didn't hire him.
That's a fair point. But what I'm saying is, this didn't start with Trump.
hold it. Who did
Absolutely.
you say courted Saul Alinsky?
I didn't say quoted, but Obama.
Okay, I quote Karl Marx from time to time. That doesn't mean I'm a Marxist. It means I'm providing context to what's happening in a given discussion. It's okay to go and quote somebody. It's just like you can quote Hitler as long as you're, using it in context and saying this was probably a really, really bad idea. We should not have gone down this road as humans and humanity.
Should I spin the wheel again?
Zelensky has driven. Yeah, let's go ahead. Yeah, let's get off the subject.
Since we're talking about Saul Alinsky.
The pendulum swings, and the farther it swings to the left, the farther it's going to swing back to the right. And we've seen it for years, and it's going to continue to happen.
Kamala was laughing in the background.
Yeah, and I said it to you earlier, Kevin, but just not hearing her cackle for 4 years in front of the crowd, it's worth it. There's not, short of
a nuclear bomb on America, right?
On America, we're ahead.
The bar you set.
That's the bar I set.
Tony, so he's a fairly low bar of what he's going to allow this administration to do.
Yeah, Bob, and you know,
it'd be pretty hard for them to do anything that makes it worse than that.
I don't know. Let me tell you, there's a lot of people out there that hear Trump's voice and they absolutely recoil in the same fashion. And Bob, your pick.
What do you want to talk about, Bob?
That's a great question. What do I want to talk about?
Just not Saul Alinsky.
Yeah. Do you have a brother?
All listeners are Googling Saul Alinsky.
Yeah, there's a lot of good topics.
There are. Got a lot left.
Let's talk about the big, beautiful budget bill.
The big, beautiful budget bill.
This is one I think we'll find common ground on, so I think that's good.
All right. So why don't you set that one up? What are they doing in Congress, Bob?
Yeah, so the Senate, as well as the House, have been working on their own versions of the bill. The House bill is a little more conservative than the Senate bill, but they're all both way overspending, right? Way overspending. I think that the House bill had maybe $1.5 trillion in cuts, and it had less. And then there are continuing tax cuts that are also written into the bill as it currently sits. Kevin, I think your argument and stance on this is the tax cuts are an issue. There's not a big enough cut in spending to pay for it, and it's just going to increase the deficit. Generally, I agree with you. We need to cut spending. That's the problem. We need to cut spending drastically and enough to balance out any tax cuts. That said, I'm never going to not be in support of tax cuts. I don't care if they happen before or after the cut spending.
I would agree. Everyone loves tax cuts. Everyone loves spending. Guess what? You can't do them both.
Not everybody loves spending. I hate it.
Oh.
Okay. Bob, can you define spending?
Yeah, spending beyond a reasonable, an outflow of money beyond a reasonable amount of
reasonable.
What's reasonable, and what particular part of the budget do we want to tackle?
I try to keep my debt within, I would say, 20% of yeah.
Well, we're right now at 120% of GDP.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so we recognize we have significant problems, but is the problem the budget, or is the problem our revenue stream? Because what we're doing is every single cycle we undermine our revenue stream.
He doesn't see the two parts of the equation, and as an accountant, I see two sides of the equation. I'm for cutting spending, but I also think we've actually cut our revenue base significantly over the years.
That's the biggest problem.
I would just say, let's just roll back taxes to where they were when we didn't have a budget deficit, which was 25 years ago.
Well, let's just roll spending back to that. You can adjust for inflation. But
and we can talk about Doge here. I think you know that they're not cutting much spending, right? And the biggest expense is military.
Relatively speaking,
military
they're not,
by
but
far.
They've cut
entitlement program.
They've cut 160 billion, but it's cost 135 billion to do so. So we're 25 billion to the good. That's not even an hour's worth of interest on our debt.
Talk about Doge. I mean, Doge was a joke. If you don't,
I like Doge, and it's not done.
Doge was a way to get regulators off of Elon Musk's back. That's what Doge is all about.
We're all ideologically focused, right? Foreign aid, which clearly they hated, Department of Education, IRS, any regulatory body, right? They cut. I'm still waiting for the military cuts. I've looked at the budget. They're increasing military spending, which
You know,
which
Doge and
from
Congress are two separate entities. Keep in mind, right?
from an isolationist, Doge didn't. I didn't see any recommended cuts. I looked at the list 2 days ago on Doge cuts. Top 10, Department of Defense was not even in the top 10, and it's by far the largest department. And where,
Well,
he's an isolationist, Bob.
keep in mind it's been
Why are we spending money on military? Oh, peace through strength, right?
keep in mind it's 3 months into this. They haven't gone there yet. Hope they do.
They're setting a budget for 10 years, basically. They're setting a framework for 10 years. That's what they're doing. And they're increasing the debt.
I don't support these bills at all. They're too big. There's too much spending. They're not coming to these huge spending bills.
His whole agenda is wrapped up in this bill. His whole domestic agenda is wrapped up in these bills.
But Bob,
he's increasing the military, and he's most likely going to cut Medicaid because that's the only place that I've heard of that they're targeting cuts.
The bill's not passed. The bill's not signed, right? So we don't know what's going to be in it. It's not going to go through in its current form. I would guarantee you that.
But he has supported these bills. He's supported, I believe, the Senate bill, which had really no cuts.
It was the House bill.
But can we go back?
Well, the House bill's not going to get passed.
Can we go back to the part in the bill where we actually negatively impact our revenue stream?
Sure.
The $5 trillion in tax cuts for the already disgustingly wealthy billionaires in the country?
Well, here's the thing, Tony. They last time he was around, they
take all the billions of dollars
to
every
make
billion
the corporate tax
country,
cuts permanent. They decided to make the corporate tax cuts permanent and the individual tax cuts temporary, right?
Exactly.
They set themselves up in the situation. What I've explained to Bob is the real solution would be, and they actually sort of started talking about it when they realized, hey, if we don't tax the million, if we don't extend the tax cuts to the millionaires, hey, we could actually pay for some of these tax cuts to the middle class. But that has been dropped quickly. And I'm like, that's all you need to know, right? And they're going to increase tax cuts to corporations by allowing them to deduct pretty much any equipment or any building immediately. So our tax revenues are going to drop drastically if they actually start building factories here or investing in equipment, which is just going to raise the debt further.
More jobs and better paying jobs will increase your revenue.
But you know what's really ironic?
Again, if you're not paying the guys to pick your apples $5 an hour if you're getting any tax off of there, you're getting tax off $5 and you let it hit equilibrium and you have to pay people $25 or $30 an hour to pick apples, that's where your tax revenue comes from. There's your 28% or whatever it is, that $25 an hour is worth a lot more than 28%. Or actually, it's not even that. It's 10% on your $5.
So we are gonna strap the debt of the country onto the backs of the working poor, not onto the people who got their wealth through generational transference of wealth and really have never worked a day in their life. They're living off of their income generated by their investments. When did this country break and we placed more value on earned interest rather than the sweat equity of the individual? Shouldn't it be the opposite?
I think the value should be equal, and that's why we need a flat tax.
No, flat taxes don't work. Because, again, you've got people that consume more than others. We build all these huge airports, right? All these huge ports, all this huge infrastructure that the rich predominantly use. The poor rarely use those services, those products and services. So we're really doing all this on the backs of the poor for the benefit of the rich.
But here's the thing, right? The government shouldn't be building those. Let the companies build them.
Do you know what a corporation
industry build them?
Do you know what a corporation originally was for?
Generate revenue.
No. No, that was never the idea behind a corporation. The original corporations were put together to undertake a project for the common good. They had a charter, whether it be to build a bridge or build a hospital or something like that. That was incorporated, and that incorporation only lasted until that project was completed. At that point, the corporation was dissolved. At some point, corporations became persons. That's when America really went to crap, because the corporations now had more power than the individual and their vote.
Yeah, to be fair, the union has that same power,
Except
right?
except
And there's
the United States has
unions that are
become,
negotiating against people for their tax money, which is just as ridiculous.
except the United States is anti-union.
All our, probably all of our federal employees, non-elected federal employees, are union employees.
I don't know. I can't speak specifically to
And the military.
agency. The military is a union?
I said outside of the military.
Outside the military. Okay. 'Cause I thought you said the military's union.
Yeah.
Like, that would be a cool union to be a member of, actually. Yeah, no, I think that we've seen the power of unions in the United States really wane. And there's not a ton of power behind unions. We can see that as you go into, say, like Appalachia and coal areas. Unions used to really drive what was happening there and help people become members of the middle class. Those went away, and now everybody in Appalachia is poor.
So we're talking about Appalachia now. I lost track.
Well, no, it's
We
an
were
example.
talking about
It's
the
an
big
example.
Percentage of federal
bill, right?
employees in the union is 11%.
So 11% of
That's high
federal
as I thought.
employees are in a union.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. How does this relate to the budget bill? I lost track.
Does it matter at this point?
Just roll with it.
So we I think we all agree that the budget bill is a joke, right? Bob's saying wait to see what happens.
It's too. I don't like all that spending. That spending needs to go.
It's framework for now. Now they're just trying to reconcile between the two. So I think you're dreaming if you think that there's going to be large spending cuts. There's going to be what I'm seeing is they're going to extend the tax cuts in full, right?
Yeah, there's going to be
And
a
then
huge revenue cut.
They're going to add the incentives for corporations on factories and equipment, and they're going to add no tax on, because they have to give
No tax on
some
tips,
crumbs. They're
no
going to have
tax
to
on
give some
overtime.
crumbs to the working class. No tax on tips, overtime, or Social Security, right? Because otherwise there'll be pitchforks in the streets.
So Bob, you're
And then
you're an
then
economy.
they're going to
You're an economy guy. You're an economist. So
I wouldn't call myself an economist. I'm
but
just a
okay, yeah, you
student of the economy.
yeah, you did some studying of economy while you're in school. Explain to me how we're going to bring all that manufacturing capacity back. Like the Biden administration,
So
they
the
put
only way that you're going to be able to do that is have long-term, consistent pressure that drives that back here. And I think a lot of the capability in our country to manufacture is not here anymore, not just from a factory perspective, but also from a training, and labor perspective is just not here anymore.
Yep.
right.
Agreed.
We've moved
We
on.
haven't-
We've
we
moved on.
So that's why at that point you need long-term, consistent stance that will drive it back, and that's the only way it's going to happen, right? So what does that mean? That either means long-term tariffs or some sort of other pressure on manufacturing firms
You mean
You think-
legislation like the CHIPS
to do
Act,
that.
right? Legislation like the CHIPS Act, which brought Taiwan Semiconductor into the United States. They're building multiple facilities here in North Phoenix, and we've yet to see a single chip roll off the line, but they're getting there. They're getting close, and let me tell you, it's a scary place. It is massive. You drive by it and it's like you're going for a couple of minutes at highway speed before you get past it. It is huge and impressive.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we have to do. And we've actually got a couple of we got a huge battery factory that's going in the east part of Phoenix. And it's just a massive, massive facility as well. And all of that was on the back of that CHIPS program. So
I think what you're saying, Tony, is I'm all for key important industries making sure that we have capabilities in this country. This idea that we're bringing manufacturing back in general here is just a joke.
it has to be it has to be strategic.
And even further to that point, Bob, when he's looking at our trade imbalances, services are not included in that.
Bingo.
We're a huge service economy.
Sure we are. That's where we've been. I mean, since
which is not a problem.
that
Which isn't a problem. I think, because service is the future, and manufacturing. I believe that we should have certain capabilities in this country.
the pharmaceuticals,
Maybe pharmaceuticals, right?
Steel.
Pharmaceuticals.
We need more steel.
I'm absolutely for making sure that we incentivize and make sure people have capabilities in this country for certain industries. But the way he's going about it is just stupid. And that's not, it's what he's doing is he's pissing off the rest of the world, and they're losing confidence in the United States, which is then, keeping our treasury rates up, which you care about, right? That's the reason why he backed off the tariffs. It's the only reason why he backed off the tariffs, is because he saw the 10-year T-bill rate go, as he said, yippee.
New and high.
And that's
Overnight.
That's going to happen again if he doesn't start cutting deals.
Canada, China, and Japan dumped all those treasuries.
Yeah, and we're very naive if we think the rest of the world can't structure trade around us. And if we give them the opportunity to, they will. And he's opened the door to that. And I think that's a huge mistake. And it might not happen, but it's a risk that I don't think anyone would imagine what that means. If the US dollar becomes not the reserve currency, if some of these countries do not buy our treasuries, if we don't get capital flows into our industries, you'll really see GDP drop, and you'll see breadlines in this country. I don't think anyone's envisioned that, because they don't think he's going to carry it that far. But he's opened the door to it for I don't know what reason.
Less dependent on debt is something that I would like to see, to be honest with you.
We'd all like to see it, Bob.
Okay.
And the bill they have in Congress and the bills that he's supporting is going to add to the debt. So I don't know what we're
doing. I'm not arguing with you.
So
I don't like the bill. Let's cut spending.
He's got nothing.
Let's cut spending and let's increase revenues. Let's go back to the
argument is revenue is going to be increased by tax cuts, and it was during.
But it's not. It's not. That's voodoo. Exactly. That's voodoo economics.
It happened when he signed the last tax cuts.
It's a joke.
No, we increased our revenue, but we also increased our spending. Trump is not a conservative when it comes to spending. He's very liberal. The last time the last time he campaigned, the first term, he campaigned saying he was going to stop all the spending, and the first thing he did is he signed a budget. And there's a big uproar, and he said, I have to do this, but I won't do it again, and then he signed 3 more.
And he's relying on Arthur Laffer and the Laffer curve, and we actually made fun of it because the Laffer curve, get it? That's the idea that there's some maximum tax portion, and then, if you cut taxes that you can grow revenue. That was under Reagan. And it gets resurrected every now and again when people forget that it doesn't work. And that's kind of where we're at again. The reason why it gets resurrected is because corporations and rich people love low taxes. So they'll say it's either trickle down or you're going to raise more revenue because it's going to grow. The economy is going to grow so much that we're going to have more revenue. If that was the case, and we've cut taxes, as I mentioned before, since Clinton, Bush had 2 tax cuts, started 2 wars, which got us into a deep debt. Obama didn't do much on taxes. Biden didn't do much on taxes, and then Trump cut taxes again. So we've been in a tax cutting mode since we've started to grow our debt. You could play with the numbers any way you want, but that's the truth. And if you're looking at spending, what spending has increased the most is our military and our Department of Homeland Security after 9/11.
Yeah, DHS is an absolute beast.
And
Sure.
those are the two areas that they're adding more to, Bob. It's a joke. It literally is a joke.
You're not going to get an argument from me. I don't support any of that Patriot Act or the results from it or the increase in the size of government. I think 90% of government agencies should disappear.
Well,
the IRS can be a simple 15% flat tax postcard. You don't need to pay your accountant every year. You know, you can figure out 15% on your calculator. Make sure that government gets it, and you're done. NEA, that can go.
Do you realize how much we lose from tax fraud every year? And if we actually funded the IRS, it would more than pay for itself by multiples. It's actually the best investment because there's so much cheating on taxes, which I think. And so when you cut the IRS, you encourage people to cheat on their taxes.
We make $8 in revenue for every $1 we spend on the IRS. We have a revenue problem. It's not a spending problem per se. It's a revenue. It's both, but we do not have the revenues to sustain the spending that we're doing.
If you get rid of all the loopholes, it makes it much harder to cheat. You can pretty much easily figure out what somebody made. They either pay their 15% or not. You get rid of every single loophole.
I just look at something like I look at something like the inheritance tax and them rebranding it as the death tax and laugh at that. And it's like that tells me that Americans aren't that bright when they fell for that. Because frankly, that particular tax was only on inheritances over $10 million. Go ahead, tax it at 70%. Over $10 million.
It's absolutely ridiculous. You should not get taxed when you die.
You're not getting taxed when you die. Your heirs are getting taxed for the money that they're receiving because that now becomes income.
That was money that was already taxed. It's not income.
Gift. Yeah, exactly. They didn't earn it.
It's a gift. Should we tax Christmas gifts?
No.
Yeah, we do.
Tax codes for gifts. And you are allowed to gift up to a certain portion every year. So it's not a gift. So there is a difference between somebody who's earned money and created it and then passing it on. That is an event that occurs, right? That person's no longer living, right?
And even if all you're going to do is create,
people didn't earn the money.
All you're going to do is create an opopportunity for more loopholes, and the money goes into a trust and it gets inherited that way, or it gets transferred through a bank. Right. Then it gets.
Again, you just said eliminate the loopholes. A trust is a loophole, so eliminate trusts. Again, let's get down to the individual.
There's no way I'm going to support ever any politician tells me they're going to tax my inheritance. They're not going to have my vote.
Why would you care? You're going to be dead.
My kids deserve it. My parents worked their whole life. You're going to tax them again after when they want to do what they want with their money. And then anything I want to leave to my kids, you're going to take that away. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Are you leaving more than $10 million to your kids?
I hope so.
You just got 2 kids out of this conversation.
I'm 20 years from retirement, so
Well, keep working, Bob, and then adopt me.
But that's the point.
I didn't know you were that young, Bob.
Sounded,
Wow, that was a cheap shot. Sorry, Bob.
I'm not. I've got no comeback. It's all good.
Bob's an old soul.
Kevin does not. It's hard to push my buttons, man.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
As long as you're not cackling in my ear like Kamala.
There she is.
Oh, you're killing me.
Like kryptonite.
Nails on the proverbial chalkboard.
It lessens Bob's powers.
I think that is something that Bob and I agree on. Her laugh was just like, oh, please put it on mute.
How about we turn to foreign policy, since we focused on domestic so much?
Sounds
so good. I'm glad we have the peace agreements in place, because those are, rocks. Wait a second.
Yeah, where are we going with this?
So So where are we at? When were the last hostages released? Did I lose track of?
Feels like it's been about 2 months.
It seems like, let's start with Israel, Hamas, because that's really just kind of dropped off the radar, hasn't it?
It has.
I don't even know what's going on there, because the news isn't covering it anymore.
That one's always been a tough one for me, because one, terrorist organizations really annoy me to no end.
Of course, nobody. I have no. Where's love from Hamas except for some students at Columbia?
Okay, and I'm talking both sides of the fence. Terror campaigns, just to me,
right,
they're the most evil thing around, and it happens on both sides of the divide. Again, depending upon what your perspective is, if you're someone who's living in Yemen right now and you're a peace-loving person over there, you're viewing what's happening over there as a terror campaign on part of the United States. If you're an American looking at the Middle East perspective and what's happening in Israel right now, you view that particular thing the way that we're going to be discussing it. That Hamas is bad, and they are, but in the same vein, Israel is just as bad and just as complicit in this particular series of events, in my estimation, as well.
I don't think Israel would have been bombing Palestine for the last year and a half if October 7th hadn't happened.
Okay, don't disagree, but there's a level of reaction that you have. And I think that they took advantage of the opportunity and upped the reaction level to a point where it's created a humanitarian crisis that nobody can deny. This is not a pretty situation. It's one of the reasons why I try and stay away from this topic, because it all boils down to emotions rather than being thoughtful and analytical in what's going on.
I don't think we should be providing weapons.
We shouldn't.
We shouldn't be providing weapons or support from outside of maybe some aid to people.
But we just killed off USAID.
Well, that's another topic.
Sorry,
that's
too soon.
Organization. That's a horrible. There's so much money going so many different directions, and it wasn't being tracked.
Let's stick on Israel.
USAID that you would raise a question on. To throw out the baby with the bathwater and do what they did, I think that's going to affect us long term in the world standing. But we could go on to Israel.
Yeah, I don't like war, generally speaking. I don't think we should be supporting it. I don't think we should be supporting Ukraine for the same reason. It's we're funding death. That's all we're doing.
Well, we're funding
remotely.
We're funding Israel. We should have been funding Israel to the point where they were attacked, and we will, help you in your defense. The second it became an offensive capacity, that's where we should have pulled completely back and said, Israel, you're on your own in this one. We're moving out of your corner for now. What you do, that's on you. Ukraine, completely different beast. Ukraine was invaded, and they are fighting for their sovereign territory. So I do kind of...
How much of the story do you truly know?
What's that?
I mean, is there more to it? Because from what I've read, the United States have had some things like Wuhan-style labs there. And would we, if Russia had that sort of thing on our border with Mexico, what would we do? You can look at what happened in Cuba when Kennedy was in office, right? So NATO, right? That's another thing.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
we were trying to join NATO. That was going to be right on Russia's doorstep. They didn't just attack unprovoked. There were things going on that concerned them that probably were going on in back channels and maybe weren't being communicated through
Okay,
even some of our media, which I consider propaganda here for the most part, or government and state media, that
hold on.
we don't have the whole story.
The whole NATO angle is bullshit because there's a number of NATO countries that already abutted right up to the Russian border. So, and
But Ukraine is a significant
okay, but hold on. Ukraine,
country, and it's a historical relationship with Russia. I sort of agree with Bob with this. We missed the boat.
Hold on. You if you talk to Ukrainians, and I come from a part of the country of Canada where there was a large Ukrainian population. They consider themselves very different from Russians. Very different. Even though they now speak the same language, they consider themselves a completely different culture than the Russians.
Parts of Ukraine, I would say. Parts maybe not so much.
Okay, sure. Just like Texas views themselves differently from the rest of the United States.
USSR broke up. Lines were drawn, right?
They were, and and Ukraine was a nuclear power at the time.
Right.
Ukraine had nuclear weapons. Part of the deal to recover those nuclear weapons was that we would provide protections to them in the event of Russian aggression.
Yep.
We have gone back on that promise. That is why they were asking to become part of NATO, because that would then invoke that Chapter 5 protection.
But I think the nuclear weapon thing was 20, 30 years ago, right?
Doesn't matter. It's still an agreement. It's still an agreement. It should be. To Ukrainians it is. Not anymore. They gave them up under the pretext that the West would protect them from Russian aggression. Well, here's Russian aggression, and what are we doing? We're burying our heads in the sands of the agreement that was put in place.
True. There's some nuance there, but there was a three or four way agreement, many years ago. That said, Russia did feel threatened, right? That said, I don't know if you guys heard, but a few hours ago we signed that mineral rights.
The mineral rights deal, we did.
And if you hadn't heard, Russia's going to give a 72-hour ceasefire in Ukraine.
Right. I think it's because they're going to be celebrating. I forgot what they're celebrating, but they're going to be celebrating something.
Oh, they've got May Day coming up.
World War II, right? The end of World War II. It's the 80th anniversary of that. So they've got, whatever. So I lost track. Wait. So there haven't been peace agreements, right? Getting back to Trump and the 100 days. So he said it would be these things are very easy to solve. Did he not?
He said he would get it solved easily.
Day one.
So is that just Trump being Trump, or is that just not any reality in the complexity of some of these things that need to be solved?
Yeah, I don't know if I think one, it's Trump being Trump. I do think it's that. I also think he probably did believe that he would be able to get it solved based on the relationship he had with Russia.
I do too. I think he actually is disappointed and surprised that he hasn't been able to solve this yet.
Put a mark on the wall, boys. We all agree.
Putin just said a few hours ago that there's some nuances that need to be addressed, and at that point, the war can end, right? So, what those nuances are, I don't know.
Nuances be like, we get whatever we want. But Ukraine get nothing. It's good.
Sounds like the deal on the table is recognition of Crimea by the international community, especially the United States, right?
Yeah.
That's Russia. And then sort of where they're at, as far as the front lines, everyone gets to keep where they're at. And then Ukraine doesn't join NATO. I think that's the deal as I see it.
Ukraine's getting raw dog there.
Is that
I don't know. I think that's kind of what's on the table now. I don't think that'll end up being the deal. Personally, for me has been lost for many years now. I lean more towards I'd like to see all the land goes back. If we can't get all the land, then you get Crimea.
Like, we do understand why Russia is doing
Again,
what
I
they're
don't know if I
doing.
even have an interest. I don't want to pay for it anymore. I don't want to pay for this war. I don't think the United States should have any interest in that. Again, funding death. We're sitting here complaining about how much money we're spending on military and everything else. Part of why we're supporting this war is so we can send them the weapons or sell them the weapons.
Oh, I forgot the other part of the deal was no security guarantees.
Yeah.
So, like, man,
you're not only giving up territory, you're not getting basically anything.
Yeah, that's a great deal for Ukraine.
Giving up territory, they're giving up NATO, and they're giving up security guarantees. That's basically, we're saying we're pulling our support unless you agree to this. That's how I see the deal. And if that's a deal, then we really lost our standing in the world, I think, at that point.
Well, you could go the alternate route and stop supporting Ukraine and then let them fight it out without us. See how they end up.
That's what the White House meeting with Zelensky was. I mean, that's what that browbeating was. It was, you don't have any cards without us. That's that was.
I think he
great. Why don't you have a suit on? That's what why don't we hear thank you? That's what that was all setting up. Hey, this is a different day and age. We're not Joe Biden. And without us, you don't have a war. You're going to have to give up everything. So,
and I think he greatly underestimates the power and the sway of the European Union.
Who does? Trump?
Trump. I think he views the European Union as this backward old world organization that really doesn't understand the world around them. And he doesn't realize there's a lot of smart cookies in the EU. And there's a lot of economic might in the EU. Sure, they're not as big as the United States, but they still got, they got a big economy. And they've got a lot of industry. I
don't mind browbeating them to step up.
Why? They have stepped up.
Yeah, they have, but that's fairly recent development.
It is. The reason they stepped up is not because Trump opened up his yapper, which never seems to close, by the way. They stepped up because they saw Russian aggression happening. And they're like, okay, time to kick our weapons manufacturing into overdrive here and start paying for it. That's what caused it. Russia was the one who incentivized the EU to step up and start building up their arms capacity, not Trump. And his browbeating of them over NATO.
I sort of agree that Putin made a misstep in that regard, right? He woke sort of not a sleeping giant, but he woke the EU up, right? They were in a complacent attitude, I would say, and he woke them up. And I don't think he thought that was going to happen.
It's just like the punch in the mouth that Trump delivered to Canada.
The Canadian election.
Okay, another loss for Trump. Yep. The conservatives were running away with that. And then Trump happened to say, we're going to make you the 51st state. And Canadians said, F you, elbows up. And to any Canadian listening, you all know what elbows up means. And man, that was it. That changed the tide. The Liberals just absolutely spiked and they won the election. So,
everyone else gets a vote too, right?
Yep.
We're not the only people who get a vote. The rest of the world gets a vote in this, and I don't think Trump takes that into account at all.
Well, the interesting,
I don't know that he cares, to be honest with you.
He should because he's impacting our revenues. Every time he opens his mouth, he impacts our revenues. We had a $20 billion deal on the table with Canada for 88 F-35 fighters. They're also looking at a $48 billion deal for submarines. Canada is now looking at the Saab Gripen to replace the F-35. They're now looking at France for submarines. You think it was just a little coinky-dink that a French attack submarine surfaced in the Halifax harbor?
Follow through with that, and I don't know if I'd recommend buying a war tool from France over the USA.
Their subs are very good. They're very good. It's just like the Saab Gripen. That's a hell of a fighter. This idea that everything that we do is so goddamn good has to stop. There's other nations in the world that do good things too. And we have to acknowledge that. We have to accept that. And us putting ourselves on the island by ourselves is a really bad decision, because there are other partners out there for other nations to deal with. Canada can go with the EU. They can go with Japan. They can go with China. They don't have to sell their crude oil to us. They don't have to send the electricity from all their hydro to the northeastern seaboard. We have to be careful.
I agree, Tony. I think that's a massive miscalculation on people who voted for Trump, because I think Trump was voted in largely as a disruptor. It's sort of like, how worse could things get? I really think people thought that. It's like, let's throw a wrench in the system. We don't like big government. We don't like the way the country's headed. So he's going to do something about it, right? And it's worth taking the risk, because how much worse could things get? And I don't think anyone has calculated how bad things could get, and how benefited from this world order since
quite
World
bad
War
if we had
II.
done nothing too.
I don't think anyone is
Continuing down the
calculated.
path we were.
Other than the debt,
a guarantee safety.
other than the debt, our standard of living and our economy, and the debt and the economic inequality issue,
problem.
and the income inequality issue. But as far as what we generate in this country and our position in the world, to give it up for I don't know what, I don't think anyone's calculated that in the equation. Again, I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but the steps that are being taken are putting us in that position that we're going to lose. We have a potential to lose a lot more than anyone ever imagined. And the spiking of the treasury yields and all that we saw just a couple weeks ago is just the beginning of it, if we don't start thinking about that. And we're not going to the path of solving our problems internally. That's not a good equation to go down. That's all I'm saying.
Again, we have to recognize that other nations are going to work together to find solutions to their problems as well. They're not just going to look at us and say, oh, help us, America. Here, we'll give you everything. We'll give you all of our mineral rights like Ukraine just did. That's not going to happen. Canada, I think that they are looking at this as a massive opportunity, because Saab came to them and said, okay, you want to buy the Gripen? We'll actually let you manufacture it in Canada. All of a sudden, that fighter platform is being built by Canadians in Canadians using Canadian tax dollars. And
well, I think that's what Trump's trying to do, is have manufacturers come to America, right? He's offering all kinds of deals for that too, and incentives, and part of it is no tariffs.
But why would a country do that when they can enrich their own country at the same time, right? If Canada can get Saab to agree to a deal where they're building that jet in Canada by Canadians, generating money into the Canadian economy, why would they buy something from the United States?
I don't disagree. And if they don't want to, then again, it's free market economics.
But it's not a free market. We've got 145% tariffs in place against another market, and you can say they're manipulators of their currency and all, but the fact of the matter is, the Chinese planned for 100 years. We planned for 3 months. And
Oh yeah,
that's
that's another factor in the equation too. Who's going to be able to endure more pain for longer? Hmm.
the Chinese
I
have already
think so.
said, screw you. We don't care. Put your tariffs in place. We'll sell our goods elsewhere.
China's having a pretty large problem right now with their manufacturing
They
orders.
don't care, Bob. They don't care. Look at the Mao and the Cultural Revolution. Millions of them died. They don't care. They're looking at the long game.
And Bob, you're not just talking about building a factory.
So
You're
should we
talking
be looking at the long game, Kevin? Because
Our system
China
is set up to
China
look
has
at the long game.
well there you go. That's the problem. Our system right now is set up to enrich our politicians and our bureaucrats, and that's exactly what it's been doing.
bureaucrats are not getting rich.
Politically connected.
So as soon as we start feeling pain, they know the winds will change, and it's already changed. Jeez, how many times has Trump already backed off of things? And we haven't even
Just
seen
this
pressure
week.
yet.
I
Right.
I said
We haven't even seen pain
if he's
yet.
going to threaten these tariffs, he should, and he did. He should have never backed off. I don't care. He should have
Oh,
called
he
it.
has.
He has.
Well,
And he will further. He's already backing off the Chinese. There's already talk. He knows once our shelves are empty, the political environment is not going to work. And that's just the way our country's set up. Unless you change that, which nobody's talking about, I don't disagree that we should take a longer term view than we do. I do think we should, but we're not set up in that manner, right?
Because
Never
Bob,
be. We
it's not just building a factory; it's rebuilding the entire supply chain that helps fill the factory with the components that become the finished good. That
I
supply
completely
chain takes
understand.
decades to rebuild.
I completely understand. And
Right.
you got to do it without illegal labor.
Takes long
Hopefully.
term commitment, long term planning, political will, all
Yep.
of that stuff it takes to do this.
Yeah, in
And
order
there's
to
none
do
of
that, you
that.
need to have a Trump after Trump and a Trump after him, and then you,
Well,
might,
I
you
don't.
might be able to get that.
Right.
Well, I don't mean
You need,
really.
you need a
I mean that
different
figuratively.
leader,
I don't
right.
know. I don't know if J.D. Vance would continue Trump's policies or not. I suspect that he and Nancy Mace are going to be a couple of the top candidates in the GOP. You can kind of see herself setting herself up for that too. And then, you never know who else is going to come out, but you're going to need that, and you're going to need to be serious about it if that's what they intend to do and change the supply chain. And if they don't, and if we're not, then the thing is, you can see what he's doing, he being Trump, and these tariffs are continuing to solidify manufacturing union support.
Okay, but when are we going to recognize that nothing of what Trump says makes sense? He wants to bring back manufacturing capacity, but he's willing to make deals on tariffs. If you're going to use tariffs to bring back manufacturing capacities, you don't make deals. We're going to be able to eliminate taxes on everybody with the incredible amount of money that we make on our tariffs. But
if the deal is zero tariffs on goods that we're sending out and zero currency manipulation, it benefits us and our job market. China massively manipulates currency, and the amount of stealing they're doing of our corporate secrets also is at a massive expense to our industry, both in long-term revenue, but short-term revenue, and as well as expense for having to protect ourselves from China, right? So there are deals to be made. If you can get rid of all the Chinese tariffs, it would drastically help our industry. They've got tariffs on a lot of our goods.
gotta get sick of that term. There's a deal to be made. Trump was not elected to be the deal maker in chief. He was elected to be president of the United States.
Well,
He's not a deal maker. He is supposed to get people involved to create these particular engagements with other nations, these trade agreements that work for everybody. The president of the United States should be not drilling down into that minutia. That
Well,
tells
that's
you
the
what a
thing.
failure
That's the
he
thing,
is.
Tony. It is becoming like a king, right? People have to come to him literally.
He said it
And
himself. It's my
I
store,
mean,
and I will
about
set the
everything.
price.
Fear into people that's where we're headed. That literally you have to show up at his door, and with
Kiss
your
his
gifts
ass.
and your whatever, and kiss his ass to get a deal, and the rest of the country is just swinging one way or another, depending on a tweet. I
Because
That's
really,
not the country I want to live in.
again, Bob, the economics of it. How do you plan for the future and build and invest billions of dollars to build a factory if your leadership in your country turns on a dime from day to day, hour to hour? He had
That's
his
not
people out
the change in leadership.
defending the tariffs, and then he rolled them back while one of them was on air.
No, I agree. I said it earlier. Once he said we're going to have the tariffs, and once he put them in place, he should have never backed off. But he did. I don't know what you want me to say.
Okay, so let's recap. So no peace deals. Tariffs is a bad policy. The budget bill, which is his agenda, is a total disaster.
That's not.
But at least people are not crossing our
What's
border.
different about this budget bill than previous budget? This is on steroids.
It's just continuing taxes cuts to people who don't need them, and increasing our deficit, and
Everybody needs tax
and
cuts.
not changing spending. So
you could do with an
So-
extra 25% of your money.
so it is a disaster. It's not reinvesting in our country at all. It's not infrastructure. It's not the CHIPS Act. It's not. Actually, it's going to cut Medicaid. It's going to increase Medicaid requirements at the very least, which is going to impact healthcare for the low income and millions of people. So if you want to characterize it as not a disaster, go ahead. But I think we know what it is. We haven't talked about Elon Musk the whole time.
Oh, I wanted to go to a soft.
Elon.
I wanted to go to a softball first. I want to talk about some. I didn't want. I want to talk about something that's not controversial. Just to like bring things down. Maybe a notch. Let's talk about the Gulf of America.
I kind of like it.
How about the Gulf of the Americas?
I'm indifferent. I really don't care.
Yeah, to me, it's always going to be the Gulf of Mexico because that's I went to school and that's what.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to default towards things that I'm used to. You could say the same thing in church. I hate how when they change things in church and things like that. But yeah, I default to things I'm used to. That said, I don't really care.
Bob, are you a fan of the Latin Mass?
Well, I've never been to a Latin Mass.
Okay.
But I would be if I had been.
Okay. I was gonna say, holy smokes, we got something in common.
No, but I do miss the old days of some of the new stuff they have you saying in church versus the old ways. It drives me crazy. I still say it's the old way.
Traditions. Agreed.
Yeah.
Maybe the new pope will bring it back.
Have we seen white smoke yet or not?
Nope, not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, I don't think they've even. Yeah, I thought that was going to be like weeks yet. I could be wrong.
So I actually like the Gulf of America. I actually like the Greenland thing too. I don't know. I generally think we haven't in the history of the world, empires usually take advantage of their situation more than we have. At least that's been my general take with the United States.
You don't think we've taken advantage of?
I think we've been a soft empire. When you look back on the history, I guess the British Empire was sort of the last true empire. I think we're much softer than the British Empire was. Don't you agree?
I think you could probably talk to people in Latin and South America that would disagree with that pretty aggressively. I think people in Iraq would probably disagree with you.
We didn't get anything out of that equation from what I can tell.
I don't support us conquering more land. I do support I do support inquiring about the availability
That's right.
of land joining.
Is this land available?
Exactly.
We would like
And when
They don't
Denmark
use it.
says no,
Denmark holds interest in Greenland. I don't know exactly how that relationship works. From what I was reading, it's not. I think Greenland still has the right to say we're going to go be part of America if they want to.
they don't.
But
Viking, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
Greenland is a protectorate of Denmark, and they don't get to arbitrarily say. It's why they have not become their own nation to date. They would have to have agreement from the Danish government for that to take place. Just like, Guam or Puerto Rico, they just can't arbitrarily say, we're going to be our own country now. There's this group in Washington that would probably say, no, we think that you're still part of the United States because you're one of our protectorates.
Well,
So
let's see how Denmark protects them.
that would be a really dumb idea. That would be a contravention of Article 5 of NATO, and that would probably not play well.
I mean, we have bases on Greenland, I believe.
We've got one. We've got bases in Canada. That doesn't mean we can challenge their sovereignty. We have bases in Germany. We have more bases in Germany than we have in some states.
My understanding is the Arctic region is becoming more critical, especially with China and Russia. And, I visited Churchill, Manitoba, Canada, and there was an army base there that we would fly planes into. So I do understand from a global security perspective our interest in Greenland. I mean, that's a real thing, right?
Sure, but we should treat them like allies and not like somebody that we're going to conquer.
Oh, yeah, sure, but it's not his style.
Right. Yeah, some of the early language when he was talking about Greenland and Canada, for that matter, I wasn't real fond of. But I think, again, if you're leaning towards conquering, that's one thing, and if it's inquiring, that's another.
Yeah, I do think we probably can use a bigger presence there, probably. And, to the extent that, he's not going about it in the right way, I would say, which is a lot of his issue. But I think directionally,
I think he would have had a better chance if he had said nothing and then inquired through, back channels and.
Right. That's the same thing with the tariffs, to be honest with you. I think it could have been done in a much more
diplomatic and surgical way.
Right. And I think people are saying, well, he's Trump being Trump, but I don't think they realize the global downside to doing things that way and how you get other people's hair up. And like I said, they get a vote at the end of the day too. And I don't think we're factoring that into the equation.
Kevin, here's your transition. Here's your transition to the next subject. Trump went at Greenland and Canada with a chainsaw, kind of like
Elon Musk.
There we go.
I think he's dropped off the news, hasn't he, with the tariff stuff?
I think he's looking at how badly Tesla is getting absolutely crushed and saying, oops, I better focus.
There was a story in the news today that the board is looking for alternative CEOs.
Oh, they're going to dump them?
Well, stories aren't always, sometimes it's, it's trying to force change in direction. Sometimes it's not true at all and the media is making some stuff up. And sometimes it's really happening, so who knows?
Well, we know that Tesla and Starlink have both taken a kick in the pants lately. SpaceX, of course, has not because they rely strictly on all those.
Market.
Well, yeah, pretty much. They're the only ones that have the heavy lift booster to get the big payloads into orbit now, but they also rely heavily on government contracts. He's got $22 million in contracts with the American government just for SpaceX, or $22 billion in contracts. That's a lot of contracts.
It's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, my take on Elon is I think the guy is a genius. I'm not going to denigrate him for that. But having read quite a bit about him and being an earlier supporter of Tesla and all of that, I just think he's a huge risk taker. And clearly he has some issues with socialization and how he goes about things. I just don't think he understood government at all. And the way they went about with Doge. And I honestly, I was talking to Deb, the other day about it. I said, that's exactly the reason why Vivek got out when he did. Because he saw the writing on the wall and he saw his political career being destroyed by being involved with this. And so he said, I'm going elsewhere. This is not what I intended to do. This is not what I thought it was going to be, which should be more surgical and more well thought out. And Elon just kind of went in there with the hatchet and went about it. And at the end of the day, yes, they're still continuing, but I think once he backs off of it, we're going to hear less and less about Doge. And at the end of the day, I think it was more of a smokescreen and an ideological cuts than any real serious reform of government. Although they did, get rid of I think I read somewhere like 250,000 people already.
Yeah, 280,000.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to say that the government isn't bloated. I'm not going to defend that at all. I think definitely a downsizing has been in order for a while. I just saw, Al Gore was on Bill Maher the other week, right? I think that was the last time we went through it was in the 90s with Gore under Clinton. And it's a useful exercise to do every, 20 years or 10 years or whatever to kind of go through because I think government has a tendency to grow programs and agencies and have overlap just simply because of the nature of it. I think big corporations are the same way. So I think it's a useful exercise to go through, but I don't think 40 people with no experience in government under Doge was the way to go about it.
You mean 19 and 20-year-olds were not the people to bring in?
I mean, that's just not a serious effort.
Yeah, they were crunching data, right? They were looking at numbers. They were looking at data. They were looking at what are you spending? What are you spending it on?
I don't think they were crunching data. I think they were harvesting data.
I don't know about that.
As, again, an IT guy, you don't just go in and start doing what they're doing and say that you're crunching data. You want to go at that very meticulously, go in with a particular methodology and understand what data you're looking at and try to understand what problem you're trying to solve. They went in like the proverbial bull in a china shop and accessed very sensitive data. So to me, it looked more like a data exfiltration program than anything. They were getting in, getting their data, getting out. It's not like they hung around to, do a deep dive into the numbers that they were looking at.
They ended a lot of contracts. They found a lot of questionable spending, especially in Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Potential fraud. USAID had a lot of potential fraud, money going out. I was reading something just yesterday, I think it was, that there were no filters that stopped money from going out for things like, let's say they were over budget. They had already spent the budget. You could have Kevin's help shop, Kevin's hotline, Help the Poor, and they budgeted $500,000 for it, and Kevin had charged $500,000 for it, and then he goes in and he charges another $100,000, and there's nothing to stop it. There was none of that going on, and they saw a lot of that stuff. So, assuming that the fixes are in like they say they are, and they've stopped spend on those sorts of things, that's a good thing. It's only positive that's going to come of that. Maybe they break a few things, but then, you know, on the backside, somebody will make a phone call and it gets fixed, right?
Yeah, I mean, my take is we haven't seen the downside of the cuts yet, and I think we'll hear more stories as they go along of services not available or not running properly or planes flying off the runways or whatever.
Don't say that, please. I'm traveling soon.
I mean, basically the idea that the government doesn't provide any services, so anything cut is not going to affect anything. I think we're going to learn that's definitely not the case. And I think we've already started to learn that. And then when you look at the total dollars and whether it's moved the needle of anything they've done, it hasn't moved the needle, which should be the point of it all. So
you promise $1 trillion in savings and you come out with, 25 billion.
Well, it's been 100 days.
Yeah, but I've been checking the website for like the last month or two. Nothing has moved. There's been no more receipts. The quote unquote receipts are still at 30%. The website looks like it was put together by somebody who doesn't know how to put together websites it's a bad website, right? We could agree on that. If you're really going to drive savings and show what you're doing and have transparency, that's not the right kind of website you would put together. Very hard to follow, not loaded with the information that they said they're going to load. And the $160 billion number hasn't moved in, I would say, a month or two. So to say that they're in the early process with their leader clearly focusing his attention on the businesses, I don't know. I think it was a missed opportunity, and it's going to sour people on reforming government for a long period of time because it was done so badly.
So even if it's 160 billion, it's according to the site $993 a taxpayer.
Yep.
Largest amount of cuts seems to be H&HS, then GSA, and then education.
Yeah.
Department of Labor.
Why not go where the big money is first? Should have gone to Department of Homeland Security and then should have gone into, DOD.
Yeah, that's what I told Bob from the beginning. Let me know when they start cutting the DOD budget, and then I'll say that they're being serious. And
you said they were going to do it, and they were going to go look at it. Now, whether or not they actually get in there,
that was a month or two ago, Bob.
Eggs were going to come down too.
All I've heard is
eggs have come down. They're cheap.
Where?
They're still $7 in my grocery store.
Yeah, no
kidding.
Yeah. I don't know where you're shopping.
No, they're not that much here.
And gas is $3, even though the price of a barrel of gas oil is, below $60.
Right now they average $4.90 a dozen.
$4.90. Well, I don't know where you're buying them. They're $6 plus where I'm at.
That's according to Forbes.com.
Still expensive, but
yeah, it should be like $2.50.
All right, what haven't we covered? Signalgate. Are you for Signalgate, Bob?
What the hell, Signalgate?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The use of Signal for handling really top secret information.
Oh, okay. Now I remember. Okay.
That's right. That got swept under the rug.
Pretty quick.
That was being used in the last administration too. I don't know how that guy got on the call.
I don't think so. Signal is a huge no-no in federal, state, and local agencies because we have open government laws that
Good
we
record, right?
that exactly that we
Yeah,
have to
but
follow.
on her
Oh,
server,
here we
too.
go. Here you go. Butter emails. Oh, my emails.
They were. Signal wasn't. All I'm
Hold on.
saying is there's been back channels that government officials have been using.
Okay, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that. But if you are going to cast the first stone, you better not be living in that glass house.
According to Snopes, Biden administration authorized use of Signal.
I got to see this for myself because it's not allowed. Open government laws do not allow the use of products that automatically delete public record, and everything that a government agency and government employee does is considered a government record.
I don't disagree with you. They were not supposed to be using that. That said, I'm just saying they're not the only ones to have done it.
Okay, but again, if you're gonna be the first to cast the stone, don't live in the glass house. And they were pointing at the Biden administration, saying how bad everything they did was. Okay, be better, live to a better standard. Don't do the same crap.
The point is that it was sharing attack information prior to the attack. That really was the point. That he was sharing this information not only with that group, but evidently with family members. And nothing has been done in regards to that, from my understanding.
Yeah, I haven't seen any evidence of that.
What?
That he's sharing stuff with family members.
Hesketh admitted he did.
Well, maybe. Then he did, but
they don't see a problem with it, which I think is the problem.
Yeah, that he shouldn't be doing that, obviously.
Okay. Is that a fireable offense?
Yes. It's actually a felony. It's actually a felony to do so.
Well, charge them.
That's what we're waiting for. Again, 2 sets of rules.
Yeah, there are plenty of things that previous administrations didn't charge people for that they should have too.
Chief of police in Phoenix had to step down because of something very similar. Her department got caught using Signal, and that, along with the DOJ complaint, was enough to make her resign.
Yeah, I'm not big into gotcha, but I do really despise the fact that they're acting like it's no big deal. I would rather have them say, you know what? Yeah, that was not a good move.
We stepped on our dicks. We're sorry.
Right,
we won't do it again.
Right. But to say, oh, no.
Yeah, that's
wrong. I think that's a big problem in my eyes.
That's how these things are handled in government generally nowadays, whether not right or wrong.
Never give an inch. Once you start apologizing, you're losing.
So my big question is, if Trump gets to continually point at the Biden administration and say, well, they did it, does the Biden administration get to point at the previous administration and say, well, they did it? Oh, wait, that would be the Trump administration.
That's right. It's circular. I do like that he said that the negative GDP that was announced today, it was Biden's quarter, and maybe the next quarter will be Biden's too.
Yeah, no, it's garbage. Trump owns the stock market right now too. I think Trump owns the stock market. He owns all that stuff at this point. He said it. I've read that, but that's
put a cap on this a little bit. I mean, I'm willing to give him credit where credit is due. I'm trying to have an open mind about this, but the last 100 days, I would say, was worse than I expected. And I don't know where you're coming out, Bob, but I can't imagine it wasn't worse than you expected.
It's not what I hoped for.
I'll take that as
I will say that
worse than you expected.
It's the first 2 weeks to a month, I thought exceeded my expectations. The last month or so, I've been I'll say unhappy. Again, I don't like tariffs. I've never liked tariffs. Once he did it, I was disappointed that he backed off of them because, shit or get off the pot, that sort of thing. You've got to have some sort of consistent messaging. I'll be unhappy if we sign up a bill that does not cut spending. That's for sure. I'm not going to fault him on. He's trying with Russia, right?
Trying to Russia.
He's trying.
You're still giving him, even though
he's not gotten like we're going to be any other wars
from it soon. No, he hasn't gotten other wars. I'll give you that.
So we'll see. I would like to see more getting done through Congress. I think probably the president plays some sort of role in that, but what I want to see get done is reform, not new laws. If that makes sense.
You would think that owning all three components of government, that they would absolutely have no problem pushing their agenda through. But here we are, they're kind of stalemated themselves.
The vast majority of Republicans, Democrats are the same party. They're just pretend they're not.
Agreed.
And no, I don't think we'll disagree with that.
And also, I would say the slight majority are
self-serving
interest, self-serving more so than country or even population. They're I'm starting to lose words. They represent who they represent. They don't serve them either, right? Not just the country, but their local representations that they're responsible for. Yeah, it's awful, and that's a problem that needs to be resolved. We need to get the money out of politics. We need term limits and that sort of thing, which is what we've been saying for the entire existence of this podcast. That stuff's got to happen.
We need another 2 or 3 political parties.
Sure. I don't disagree. And, I wanted to argue with Andrew Yang on Twitter today about that, because he made a comment kind of similar to that. And I said, well, with this last election, instead of your party putting somebody up, you went ahead and endorsed the Democrat. I said, well, that's not going to get us anywhere. Or that's what I was thinking. I didn't respond.
Right. Nobody stepped up in the last cycle. They were talking no labels. Yang was out there, and nobody stepped up.
Part of to endorse one of those 2 candidates, and it was okay.
But one of the problems is that the election laws that are in play make it virtually impossible for a small party to compete, even at the state level, without looking at the national level. We have
to. It's been our social media and the ability to get messages out there in different manners, be it a podcast or, if you go on Joe Rogan or some of these things, you're reaching millions and millions of people. I do think there's an ability to do that there hasn't been in the past. And the fact that no one has stepped up to take that place and put that together. And there's talk of it, there's talk of it here and there, but they still haven't done it. I do understand the barriers, but I do think that there are opportunities, especially given the low level of confidence and that Americans are seeking something different, and the ability to almost do it a little bit. I still think you could do it in a way that you don't need as much as you needed in the past. I don't think you need as many door ringers, and if you get a momentum and a viral movement going, I think you can really sway this country. Nobody's done it.
You do, but you need certain number of names on a petition to get you on the ballot, and then that's just in possibly your district.
Right. You're right.
And then you have to go and do that in 50 states.
Yeah, there is a certain level of organization that you need at some point, right?
Yeah. So to really try and have a dramatic impact, it's not that easy. It is not that easy to just say, third party. You've got to have a lot. You got to have deep pockets. You've got to have organization, and you have to have continuity in messaging across the country as a platform that is going to resonate with voters and get them to the polls to help get you in some of those particular races.
Right. And that's what we should be looking at, making it easier to do that, right?
But we're making
That should be
voting
a lot of
harder to do.
I know. We're some way going in the wrong direction on that, and we're kind of falling for the two-party system and fighting amongst each other rather than looking at the overall system and saying how do we reform that to get different people into the process than what we're seeing day to day. Instead, we're pointing fingers at each other, and that's just serving to keep the two-party system in place.
Divide and conquer.
Yep, and we fall for it. Oh, well, do we have any other topics to cover? I think we covered most of them here. Uh, we didn't talk too much about the the universities and the law firms and sort of the kind of the threats. You know, even yesterday the sort of Amazon, what I would call the Amazon threat, where Amazon or an affiliate or a small portion of Amazon was going to show the effects of tariffs on the pricing. And that sort of became a story. The president got on the phone with Bezos, and that was, taken care of. So, sort of the idea. I know, we've talked about before, Bob, the jawboning and the social media, and during COVID that the government was influencing private industry. But geez, I don't know if we've seen stuff like we've seen lately, and especially with all these kind of favors and this kind of kowtowing to Trump. I mean, you could say it's occurred before, but I'm just trying to be honest. I've never seen it at this stage before. I don't know what your take is on it.
Actually, I wasn't listening. Sorry, Kevin.
Well, just the law firms, and the fact that, I mean, he's cutting deals with law firms. You know that, right? For government business.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. And he's also, I mean, we could talk about corruption. He put out the meme coin after we talked last time, prior to the inauguration, that him and Melania issued their own currency, which still astounds me that that's not
Illegal?
that's not a thing. That kind of just was swept under the rug. Oh, he's got Trump coin. What? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that Trump coin lately. And exactly, it does serve a purpose of siphoning money to him.
You think?
Knowing that, you and I should probably both have some of it. Because sooner or later it will spike again, probably around the time that somebody wants something.
That's what I'm talking about. The level of potential corruption here is just astronomical.
Yeah, do you remember when corruption used to be done in the dark? Now they're doing it.
And if you can prove it, that's one thing. But there's nothing, I don't think, illegal about having his own meme coin. Right?
While being
as long as he's not going to China and saying, I'm going to drop this tariff if you buy 100 million of my meme coins. Right?
Yeah, but while being the sitting president of the United States, there used to be rules in play that when you became the president, any investments would be put in trust and locked down. You could not make investments.
I don't need to abide by any standards, right? I mean, that's basically what be it releasing tax returns, be it any of it. It's like, well, if it's not illegal, then if it's not quid pro quo, if it's not, I'm going to pay you to do this, well, then I can pretty much get away with anything.
I'm thinking about this a lot lately because the whole situation with judges right now as well, and this specific fact and a few other things, or this specific thing, and a few other things. There are a ton of loopholes. And some of those loopholes exist solely because the Constitution exists and the protections it provides. So I don't know how you address that. Right? it's really a double-edged sword. How do
Well,
you?
we address it as an electorate, right? We don't stand for it, right? We
Because
say
we can
we
all
have certain standards as a country, and we're not gonna abide by it. That's I hear you, Bob. You need to. We have a system where we have certain freedoms and certain things are allowed, and that serves a purpose. But at the end of the day, it becomes we the people, and if we the people aren't paying attention and enforcing those things, well, shame on us, right?
Yep.
we used to be a country that knew right from wrong, and we used to hold people to a standard based on what we believed was right and wrong. I don't think that we can come to an agreement, a consensus as to what is right or wrong anymore. Just
I
because
agree, and I think a lot of it is the politicization of
everything.
everything.
Yep.
Well, it's the media, it's social media, it's all of the whole environment, right? Nobody's carrying their weight in that regard.
The president of Arizona State University, Dr. Crow, he's on a little bit of a campaign right now where he's going around talking about the negative impacts of what is happening to universities right now, especially D1 R1 schools, so Division 1 Research 1 schools, and how all of the negative outcomes that are happening to the schools from a financial perspective, what the long-term impact of that is. Because the vast majority of the research and development that takes place in this country happens at the D1R1 schools. And by the type of environment we're creating right now, those particular schools are not engaging in a lot of research. The students that they would traditionally rely upon to do that research are no longer coming here. And it's something that's extremely disturbing, and he's recognizing this, and he's going out and trying to communicate this. And I'm kind of waiting for that to resonate and for people to understand, because it really goes back to understanding right and wrong, depoliticizing what's happening in education, because that's ultimately what's happening here. Is we've seen a politicization of education and casting education as the bad guys in things, and in reality, they do a lot of things that, like, they generate just a ton of patents.
Yep,
Here's
absolutely.
the thing, though. You're making the argument that's my argument as to why we need small government, and government should not be involved in these things. Because government can exert its influence and its will once these facilities, whether they're companies or houses of education, be it K through 12 or universities, once they get used to that funding, or municipalities for that matter, once they get used to the funding,
Who else is going to fund
things change.
Who else is going to fund basic research, Bob? I was involved in technology and biotechnology funding, and I could tell you venture capitalists and angel investors are not funding basic research. Basic research is done at the university through government grants, through these educational institutions, and you have no idea how much the products that we buy every day and the technology that we rely on, from the internet to the cell phone, is based upon that basic research that started with a government program through university funding, as Tony just said.
I think a free market would do.
No,
No.
it will absolutely not.
Yes,
It will.
The free market.
I talked to hundreds of venture capitalists. I will guarantee you they are not funding basic research. It's not.
Why is the government funding the effects of cocaine on transvestite rats?
That is not a thing. That is not a thing.
It is a thing.
No, it's not. It's transgenic rats. There's a massive difference.
Can have real value at the end of the day, and you might not see it based upon a title of the study.
I disagree, and I disagree, and we should not be backing student loans either, and that's the thing, right? I mean, Government-backed student loans, Obama did it. It hasn't helped the cost of education. The cost of education has gone up.
Student loans have been around for decades. When
Right.
you
Sure.
guys went to school, no. Pell Grants have been around since Christ was a cowboy.
That doesn't. Pell Grants are a little bit of a different story, but we don't probably need those either. But I'm talking about direct funding and backing of student loans. So you got a loan going in, a guy spending $100,000 on a basket weaving degree that he's never going to be able to pay off because he's never going to make any money with his basket weaving degree.
Okay, that's
the government backs it, and the university takes the money, and the university has no risk. That's
an extreme example. There aren't many people who earn basket weaving degrees.
Okay,
but
there's gender studies.
There are tens of thousands of students that graduate every single year that go back into their communities and make a difference. I know as a past vice president of a university, of a college.
Pay off the loan. That's the thing.
But they can't. You have to take the loans out to go through school. School has become so expensive. Even if you go to the community colleges, you're still paying $85 to $100 a credit hour.
Since the federal government started backing these loans. Prior to that, it wasn't nearly as expensive, nor was it rising as fast.
Actually, what really screwed things was institutions like University of Phoenix. And I don't like naming institutions, but they charged ungodly amounts of money and basically became quasi, degree mills.
Right.
You could buy your degree, and everybody chased them. It's just like pick your product or service out there. If somebody can attract the customer and have them overpay for the product they're selling, is anybody going to go and try and undercut them? No, they're going to take their product and they're going to chase the price.
I don't disagree. And the feds backed it. They're complicit.
Yeah, because they
gave out the loans.
They did that to try and help lift up communities, to lift up people that did not have the money to go to school. Otherwise, all you're doing is you're creating this system where the rich are the only ones who can better themselves. The poor always remain poor. There's no potential to change the class that a person is born into. Guaranteeing these loans then gives those students an opportunity to go to school, get an education, get out there, better themselves, and at the same time lift up the communities that they're living in.
You put them in lifetime debt because they've got these loans that they signed $100,000 for, and they're making $30,000 a year, and the interest rate on it right now is probably 6.5%.
That's accurate. That's accurate. Student loans need to be changed. To me, student loans should be like 0.5% to 1%. It should not be. It should not be a money-making enterprise.
Need to be put on the hook for these. If you're going to give somebody a $100,000 degree, and they're going to make $30,000, and the loan doesn't get paid back, the university should be on the hook for that, not the government, not the taxpayer.
All they need to do is take out student loans as a profit center. As Tony said, the interest rate should be much less on these things.
Administrations need to be shrunk drastically.
Colleges.
And if you're a teacher, your pay as a sociology teacher should be nowhere near the pay for a physics teacher. It just shouldn't. It should be tied to the money and that's the thing, right?
All right.
And in turn, these inflated salaries are getting donated back to the government officials in part that are creating these disasters for students.
Colleges and universities are held to account to some degree. Not to the degree we should hold them to account to, but they are held to account to some degree because they have to generate specific outcomes in graduation rates. And if they don't achieve those graduation rates, they lose federal funding. So there are checks and balances in place. Do they go to the extent I think that they should go after working in that particular industry and seeing how the sausage is made? No, I think it should be a lot worse. And I agree with what Bob's saying. Colleges and universities should be held accountable, where if students do not achieve the educational outcome promised, they should be penalized.
I agree with both of you on this, but I think the idea of stopping funding basic research and not funding these universities that it appears that the current administration is going down, I think is a grave mistake that we'll see repercussions far into the future if we continue down that path. Student loans and everything, that's a different issue. That's complicated. The price of college. Clearly, we're spending too much on administration and buildings and all of that rather than the actual instruction and education. I think government should, hold universities accountable to certain percentages, or they should have to spend a certain percentage on instruction rather than administration. And there might be certain standards, but clearly they need to be higher than they are currently. Um, but I think just undermining what used to be our elite education that attracted people from around the world to come to this country and was the pride of this country. Again, I think that's going to have long-term repercussions here.
Yeah, the what we're losing in research is going to blow up in our face. We can go back to Elon Musk and talk about what a genius he was, but what made him such a genius was the fact that he identified all the patents that were done in higher education through those R1 schools and used those. And many times, possibly without paying for the use of those patents, better to try and have them challenge you in court and make the $1 billion ahead of time than get the permission to use them type thing. So he was smart enough to recognize how to put all of those patents together into a product and service. That's where he was smart. He reminds me a lot of Steve Jobs in that regard.
Yep. There's a lot of the tech. There's a lot of industrialists that realize that they could get those licenses and patents typically on the cheap. And I've seen it many times. And I believe at the end of the day, it's a good thing because the products, somebody needs to take the risk and commercialize these things because it's not going to happen through the university. And often it's the people who develop them that sometimes get involved with the commercialization.
Yep.
Sometimes it's not. But I do believe that you need help to get that. And if some of the economics, aren't favorable to the university or the government, so be it, as long as the benefit is reaped at the end of the day. But to cut off that funding and to think that that's just government waste, I just
I don't like it. I don't like government spending. It's all waste.
I know. You have no idea, Bob, the return that we've gotten from those type of investments over time. Books could be written about what we've gotten from those grants to universities and people doing these studies. Yes, you can point out, well, this sounds like a stupid study, or that sounds like there's always going to be the anecdotal ones that got through. I would say if you actually read the study and the grant request, there might be more to it than a title on a study that you can kind of make fun of or that makes a cute headline. But to say that that's wasted money, that's some of the best money that we could ever spend as a government. I'll stand by that to the end of till I die.
Yeah,
because I've seen it. I've seen it.
You get the money out of politics and the corruption, I'd be more supportive of it.
All right,
but I take a cynical look at all that stuff, man.
I hear you.
It's self-serving.
I think we should probably wrap up here.
Yeah, I agree.
Call it this is an extra long. I think I'm going to post it all as one super podcast. I think we've covered a lot of topics. Is there anything else anyone wants to chime in on that we haven't covered?
I just want to say thanks, guys. It was fun again.
It's always fun.
Yep.
We thank you for coming on.
Bob, always enjoy locking horns. But I must say,
Hopefully we can meet in person sometime.
Yeah, I must say that I think that we agreed more tonight than we have on the other two podcasts combined. So this was kind of cool. I think that underlying, we agree on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think we all want the same thing. What's best for people. I think there's just things there we just disagree sometimes, and that's okay.
I want what's good for transgenic mice.
If it turns out that these tariffs worked and we got better trade deals and we're bringing in revenue, I'll be the first to say, hey, he did a good job.
That's the thing is we won't know for many years if these tariffs worked or not. You might know sooner than later they resulted in complete disaster, but you won't know for 4 to 10 years.
I sort of agree. It's a longer term play.
Yeah.
But we'll see. All right. Well, thanks so much, guys, for joining. Thanks for everyone for listening. Hopefully it was a good podcast, and we'll be back talking to you sooner than another 100 days.
Until next time.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.